ready to go. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's RD2RD Live Show. Today, I have Lesli Bitel on to talk about the topic of discovery calls. And as we were chit-chatting here just before going live, she said, it's one of her most favorite topics to talk about. But I think as a, online business owner, of course, you guys know me from RD2RD, but I'm also a private practice owner. It can also be a really anxiety-provoking topic. Discovery calls, feeling intimidated about how to do them well. Could I do them better? What should I be doing? You never really get to sit in on other people's discovery calls. Do I do them like other people? Could I? So Lesli is, I'll let her introduce herself, but she's really kind of an expert when it comes to growing a nutrition practice business, really that strategy business side. I follow her and I really admire the knowledge that she brings to dietitians who sometimes don't have that business background, really digesting it down into actionable nuggets that, don't feel overwhelming. So I'm really excited that, Lesli, that you said yes to come on and share your wisdom with the RD2RD community. And with that, why don't you kick things off and tell us a little bit about yourself and journey as a dietitian?
Great. Well, first of all, Megan, I'm just so happy to be here with your community today. I'm absolutely delighted to, share and teach and just pass along any nuggets of wisdom that I can. I think it's going to be really helpful because, like you said, this is kind of a tricky topic, right? And it is one, I will just start by saying it is so important that we master this skill, right? Because all marketing strategies and tactics converge upon your ability to have a really powerful and inspiring enrollment conversations. I mean, we can be doing Instagram, we can be doing all these other things, but eventually that person, your potential client, is going to want to talk to you, right? And so we have to be able to master this skill. So all that being said, is in terms of my background, so I think I'm a dietitian like everyone else on the call today. And so I started out in clinical in Chicago and, got lots of great clinical experience and, burn nutrition, spinal cord injury. Also got some nice experience when I worked at my first clinical job at Northwestern in corporate wellness. So had lots of nice experience there. Shortly thereafter, I moved into corporate and entered the world of medical and pharmaceutical sales and marketing. So that's really where the bulk of my business experience comes from. So I was in that sector for 13 years. So spent lots of time in corporate.
You had sales in your job title. So for me, that's like, oh my gosh, you're like, never steer me away from that.
Yeah. So, that's what I did. So I started as a salesperson and then kind of worked my way up, went into marketing. So that's the other thing is I really love like the messaging and, clarifying the whole marketing strategy. And I think that's why eventually, this was just a perfect segue. What I do now, which many of you guys know, I have a business coaching practice, 100% business coaching. I actually closed my doors to my private nutrition practice. Gosh, I think it was around 2013, 2014. I think 2014, I closed them for good, right? And then moved full-time into this business coaching space, helping registered dietitians to get their practices up and running. And really, I think my main role now is really to give people like that blueprint, right? And I want to preface this by saying blueprint for the person, right? It's not like it really depends on what the person's goals are, what they want. And also I like to look at what are they good at, right? Because we want to try to leverage those things that the business owner is really good at in order to create what their version of their dream practices.
I love that. It's really interesting. I'm turning 40 later this month. So everyone, if I look stressed, but the practice that I want to have, if you'd have asked me a decade ago before I'd had well, a little bit more than that, my first child, I would have told you something completely different versus now with 2 young children, there's a difference of what, I want my practice to look like. And I think you make a good point about there really isn't a blueprint. There's the right fit for each person. Right. So with that, I think you started touching on why discovery calls are important. And I really like the way you said that eventually someone's going to want to get on the phone with you. And it's kind of this convergence of everything you've done to prepare. Why do they really matter? Why don't you just have a quick, why do you need to have them?
Oh my gosh, for so many reasons. I mean, again, I think the big reason, the big why is because, as business owners, we're spending a lot of time trying to crack the code on marketing, right? And so, many of us are trying to get our names out there, get in front of our target audience. We're really spending a lot of time, trying to get in front of our ideal target audience or our ideal client, right? Mm-hmm. So, which is all fine, right? We write blogs, we do talks, we do Facebook Lives, right? All of these are, tactical activities that we have in place in our business in order to help our target audience to find us, right? To discover our work. So the reason why nailing your strategy for discovery calls is so important is because, like I said, eventually these folks, whoever it is, they're going to want to talk to you. I would say, generally speaking, now this is a generalization, but especially if you're asking someone to spend, more than a couple $100, I would say they're probably going to want to have a conversation with you. Mm-hmm. So again, I just can't stress that enough, the importance of really having the skill set down. And I would say it's a science and an art, in terms of being able to successfully, powerfully, and, to be able to navigate through that conversation so that the end result is that the right people are actually inspired to say yes to working with you.
Yes. And I'm checking here, just always verifying my live stream. It looks good. We have some comments. So if anyone has any issues, let us know. Or questions for Lesli. I have a big list and I'm a total time hog. So we've prepped, but I want to make sure those of you listening in get what you came to the live show today to have answered. So drop those in. If I know they're coming up, I'll kind of make note of that and we'll definitely get to your questions. So you talked about why discovery calls are important, and I think you said before it is selling to a degree, right? You're trying to get someone to spend money, right, on this call, and that can feel a little bit scary. But before we talk about what some of the myths are and start talking about how to structure them well, I think that's also, you mentioned marketing and that you have a good background there. So sometimes I want to get better at discovery calls. I'm just not getting enough of them booked, or I don't really have enough of a chance to practice. What do you recommend, if someone's listening in and wants to have more discovery calls booked?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I think one of the best kept secrets. Okay. Are you sitting down? You're sitting down, right? Okay. You don't have to have I love marketing. Like I live and breathe it. It is like my favorite thing in the whole world. But the reality is to get more discovery calls, you can look in your own backyard. That is the beauty of it. You really don't need all kinds of fancy and time-consuming marketing strategies online in order to book more of these. I call them strategy sessions or enrollment. There's a lot of different names, right? So I kind of go back and forth. I'm talking about the same thing. Basically, We're talking about that conversation that you have with a potential client. We sometimes call that a prospect, right? Mm-hmm. Before they decide to step in and work with you. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it can be part of a paid session as well. So I do want to clarify that. We can circle back around to that topic.
Yeah, should they be free or should you charge for them? Those types of questions.
Yeah, sometimes those are really good questions. But I think one of the tips that I would love to pass along to people here on this live stream is that you could be at a party, you could be at your kid's soccer game, you could be at a PTO meeting, whatever.
It's like boot camp for me. I'm like, oh, geez, your morning boot camp session.
Exactly. So wherever you're in a conversation with a person, you could be at a networking meeting, wherever. If you have a chat with someone and you start to go, I could maybe help this person. All you do is invite them into a conversation, right? So I personally think that is something that, like, often we don't do that, right? Because we're thinking, oh my gosh, it has to come through health profs, or it has to come through all these, specific marketing channels. I think a great way to book more calls is simply to invite people and just say, I really think I can help you. Would you like to spend a little time on the phone? I'd love to offer that to you complimentary, right?
Yeah, that's a really good tip.
Look at it that way. So it can be really casual. It can be really, like warm and invitational.
Mm-hmm. I think that idea of overcomplicating it, that we have this idea of how it's supposed to be, and that it can sometimes be a lot different than that and can work just as well.
Absolutely.
So before we talk about the structure, we started touching on myths about debunking kind of the discovery call. What do you hear out there that every time you hear it, you're like, oh, about discovery calls that you just wish people wouldn't say or is untrue?
Okay, I think one is, all right, so let me start with the first one that comes to my mind, and that is, just because it's free, people are going to take action. Mm-hmm. I think that's another big issue, and a contributing factor to sometimes dietitians not getting enough of these booked in their businesses, because they've got free discovery call on their website. Just because it's free doesn't mean people are going to take action. And frankly, I know we're probably going to touch on this too, Meagan, but just the idea that if you have that on your website worded like that, which I would say most of us do, that's probably not working for you, right? You're probably not and the reason is because there's no sense of urgency, right? People do respond to scarcity and urgency and exclusivity, right? You really need to, ideally, you're going to make this sound a little bit more special than, hey, anytime you want to book a free session, I'm here for you. I'm just waiting here, right? People don't respond very well to that. So I think myth one, just because it's free, people are going to do it. Not true. And I think one of the other, actually I have two more. Number two is that a discovery call is your opportunity to kind of talk about your process, right? And that is not the right way to go about it. People don't really care
like when they're going to get their paperwork and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, they don't care. What they care about and what you're really selling is hope, believe it or not. The transformation, the possibility, and you're not promising, you're not like guaranteeing that, the person's going to achieve all that you've talked about, but that's really the impetus or the trigger for them signing up, is they want the transformation, not they want this test, and after they've talked to you, now they understand the science behind it. Like, they don't care.
Right.
And then the third one, I would say, is making the call, like not having structure, right? Handing over the reins to the client, the prospective client, and just making it, okay, well, what questions do you have?
Right.
Those three, I mean, they're kind of mistakes / myths.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I think that your first one about it's just because it's free that people will take it in that scarcity mentality of it's sitting there. So there really isn't any motivation to do so. I was a couple of months ago, I had Krista Biegler on and we talked about kind of her sales funnel of sorts and really, working her way backward from, she does only exclusively online, but that her email sequence, that the one thing she wants people to do is get on the phone for a discovery call at the end, and hers is paid, but that's the entire purpose of that, nurture sequence, that's her desirable outcome.
Right.
And so it's as we talk about, you see someone in, face to face and like, hey, let's get on the phone, that some of that, maybe they know you, they've interacted with you, they have some level of respect, but over that email, using that nurture sequence to hopefully get them, how are you going to do that? They're just going to hit your website and go, oh yeah, let's do this right now. So her approach is a little bit different. She doesn't expect people to come to her website and book a discovery call. She expects them to do that after finishing her email sequence and watching her really detailed webinar, which I thought was really interesting, so that she has fewer questions during her discovery call, so she's not answering the same thing over and over again.
That's a good strategy as well.
So if anyone wants to go back and watch her sales funnel, it's a little bit specific to her type of practice, but we didn't talk about discovery calls. So that's, kind of what a discovery call is and kind of what it isn't. And you already touched on, it's not about your process, it's not about turning over the reins. What is a discovery call, and what are the key components? If you kind of break it down into little chunks, like what happens first and what should happen first, because we don't get to sit in on other people's discovery calls, which would be really cool. HIPAA violation.
Okay. So, all right. And it's funny you say that. Wouldn't that be great if you could sit in?
Yeah.
So, all right. So, and I do have a little more to share on that too, that concept, because it's that important. I mean, this is not a skill that we were born with, right? The other thing I want to make kind of clear is a lot of people get on these calls and they think it's about asking people for money, and so they kind of psych themselves out. So I do want you to try to not think of it that way. You're not there to ask people for money, right? So try to erase that if possible. And actually, so that leads to the first step of this discovery call. I break them down into there's several steps that I think are really important. The first is the mindset piece, and really putting aside those fears about asking for money, okay? Instead, you want to go into the conversation. You really want to establish yourself as the leader, first of all. You want to set the agenda up front, okay? Because we all know people get on the phone and they want to go in all different directions, right?
Yes, that was one question about, they go too long. How do I make them shorten them up? Keep them on track.
That can be a challenge for all of us, really. But I think the first step is you have to have a clear structure to your call and a clear strategy. And then right when you get on the call, you establish rapport. People get kind of nervous, so I would just do a little small talk, welcome them, just make them feel at ease. Then I would give them an overview of what to expect. Here's what we're going to talk about, this, and this, right? So that way, when it starts to go off the track, so to speak, you can gently rein them in and just say, all this is so important, and I really, I do want to hear about all of this. So you're affirming that it's important. You're not dismissing, right? And then you can say, however, because we have such a limited time today, let's try to focus on these things that we set out to do, right? You can only do that if you set the agenda up front.
Got it.
All right? So that, I would say, is step number one. And that way you're really establishing yourself as the leader and the expert, right? You're like, look, I do these all the time, and this is how I like to run these sessions. This is what I found to be most productive for me and my clients.
Mm-hmm. I think that really helps, most people, we're medical professionals. When was the last time you scheduled an appointment with a new doctor or physical therapist and they're like, let's get on the call and talk? It can be a little, I don't want to say anxiety provoking. What is this dietitian going to ask me? So saying it up front can really help to make your client less anxious too. I've found, what are we going to talk about? They're nervous.
Absolutely. It's surprising. Mm-hmm. Actually, it is kind of surprising how nervous people can be. So yeah, it puts their mind at ease. It gives structure to the call. And it I think it really helps keep things on track. But most importantly, it puts you in the driver's seat so that you are perceived as an expert, right? And not just kind of wishy-washy, hey, what do you want to talk about today? Or, hey, now's your time to ask me any question you want, because what's going to happen there, and I don't want to imply that you want to be withholding, okay? But if you set it up that way, why are they going to hire you at the end of this? right? Like if you're just going to answer the questions and do the work, and that's probably the other thing I should mention is the discovery call is not you doing the assessment and doing the work. Okay. You're not doing the work for free in this call. Okay. Want to make that super clear.
So how do you get them to elucidate their specific issue so that you can help give them hope for that without letting them go down the crazy rabbit trail that's really hard to rein in? Not that that ever happens. Just saying.
Okay. So here's the things that I would recommend that we focus on. Number one is instead of it being like a real clinical kind of conversation where you're reviewing their labs and we're not really doing that. What you want to do is we're making it more of like an emotional conversation, believe it or not. The emotion, people buy based on emotions. It's been shown over and over again. So we really want to tap into that emotional side of the brain in order to inspire them. Honestly, we're inspiring them to move through that change process. Remember the readiness to change, right? And we can only do that if the person is clear on their why. What is your big why here? Why do you want to change, right? And what are you aspiring to achieve? So I think the foundational pieces of this conversation are exploring the pain points with the client, right? Where are you struggling? What does that feel like? How is that getting in your way? What is it costing you to be stuck in this place, right? So you're not like, we have a tendency to go right into problem solving. And that's what I want to really try to steer people away from. You're letting your client articulate their story and their why. Okay. How is it getting in your way? Right? Questions like that. So we're helping them to really deepen their level of awareness around how this problem is getting in the way of living their best life.
Okay.
So that's one side. That's like one side of the coin, right? The second side, the other side of the coin that we definitely want to integrate into this conversation is we want to help them to craft a positive vision of, what they want instead. What does that look like? What would you be able to do, be, or have if you were able to achieve that, right? And so I would say those are like the two really important sides to the conversation.
Oh, I think you've made such a good point here, because I think that tendency of jumping in and offering little tips that we think will position ourselves as a leader versus that value for them of self-exploration and telling us what they need and where they want to be, that we think we're helping by just jumping in and offering these little nuggets.
Yeah, isn't that fascinating?
Yeah,
that,
really.
That we do. And we do that, and I'm sure that in the conversation it feels like the right thing to do. And if we can showcase our knowledge, then we're thinking, then they're going to think I'm really great and I know so much. But you just have to remember that change process. People build instantly. They have a wall of they push us away. Even if we can't see it readily, but if we tell someone what to do, they build kind of a resistance, right? And so it's really important. We're just giving them, and truly the thing that I want to drive home, there's so many points to this, this conversation, giving the person space to talk about, their challenges, how that's spilling over, how it's impacting them, and then moving into, well, what do you want instead? If you're able to, improve your IBS, right? How would your life change? What would that look like? What would it feel like? How would that impact your social life, your job, your career, all these different things. So by giving them the space to do that, oh my gosh, it's exponentially more valuable, because then they're clear, like they're motivated. They're like, oh my God, it's been such a gift, right? No one has ever asked me these questions. I've never thought about it in this way. And I feel so clear that I don't want to stay here. And I want to instead take the necessary steps to move into this different place. So it's a great setup to then, if we're going to still talk about the different steps.
Yes.
So far we've got, establish yourself as the leader, right? Step 2 is explore and deepen their pain points. Step 3 is to help them to craft a really positive vision of what they want instead. I would say step 4 would be at that point to boldly present your offer. But only then do you present your offer. So often we just go right to it. Well, here's how I can help, right? Okay, well, you need to lose weight. All right, here's what we'll do, right?
So, what do you do instead?
Yep, here's what I want you to do. Here's what I recommend, right? And it's just not all that inspiring. And people aren't even really clear that they want to do it. And then we wonder why people drop off. So step 4 is to boldly present the offer. And, the thing that I want to drive home during this section of presenting your offer, you're just inviting someone to basically solve the problem. So you really want to be cognizant of positioning yourself as the solution. It's like you're the bridge to help them get from pain and suffering and struggling to the other side. And I know people are kind of freaking out at this because I hear this all the time. Oh my God, but I can't promise. What if it doesn't work out? All those things, right? Mm-hmm. So you do want to be clear on, what are some of the results and transformations that you're reasonably comfortable that people are likely to. You're not promising. The human body is way too complicated. Like, no one can promise. You go get surgery from the top, neurosurgeon in the entire world. They can't promise. Like, it's impossible. But what you can say is, look, here's what I've seen before. Here's what's likely. Here's what my program or my service is designed to help you to achieve.
Right. And I think I'd like you to talk, because you mentioned before about some of the myths or not doing is then talking about the process. So we jump into talking about, here's what I'm going to do to you, basically, versus boldly presenting your offer. Those are not the same thing, right?
No.
At all. So that whole idea of walking them over the bridge or showing them the bridge.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, just helping them to be clear of what's at stake, right? You have to have that emotional setup first before people are in a place where they're like, yeah, I see, I need to change. So you can't tell someone they have to change or they should change, right? They have to. So what I think the skill that is so important here, a lot of people think this is like motivational interviewing. And I guess to a certain degree it is, but it's really just being being a skilled listener instead of being the expert. Like, really, it's recognizing that it's really up to them. Like, they don't have to do this. They don't have to change, right? It's really their call. So it's just giving them a little bit of space to let them explore their situation, what's at stake, and what's possible for them instead. And then, if assuming they seem like a good fit and they're motivated, then we present our offer and we really lead with the results and transformations that we can, we think we can help them achieve. Again, we're not promising, but we think we can help them to achieve X, Y, and Z if they step in. And so the first component of presenting your offer is laying it out in such a way where they're clear on the transformations. Like, if I step in, I'm likely to achieve X, Y, and Z.
Okay.
Only then do you move into, and here's what the program looks like. Here's what you get. First, we're going to do this. Then you get that, right? Kind of the bells and whistles. And then, so you've got a few different steps to each of these big chunks, right? Then you move into talking about the investment.
Okay.
Yeah. So
a lot of moving parts there in the discovery call.
For sure. I mean, I come from a really, really heavy sales background. And the thing I can share is that it's a little different, right? Because like that kind of sales, I was selling someone else's product, right? Way different than, being in a position where you are the brand and you are basically the service. And you're dealing with human beings that, are really struggling. You're dealing with the public, right? It's way different than B2B. So, so it's different. There's a lot of psychology here. And I think what it requires, like I said, a really strong ability to be a good listener, right? I think that's the number one thing. But still position yourself as the leader. Like, you don't want to be such a listener that you're just like, yeah, I'm just going to listen to you for 3 hours, right?
Right.
You got to rein it in. That's where you guys have to have a process and a strategy and a plan. Otherwise, it will go off the tracks.
Yeah. Jen here said, I make the mistake of letting potential clients take the lead. I struggle with connecting the urgency with why people should help. You think it would be hard. It wouldn't be that hard, but giving that urgency and that it's time to act, now, not next week.
Oh, that's the other thing, right? Is that urgency. Because a lot of times people do, they're like, well, this sounds great, but I'm going on a cruise, or I'm, maybe in the fall. I don't want to do it in the summer. So you really, and I think that, again, by laying that foundation, by talking about what's at stake.
Yeah, and if you've already asked them why now, like, why did you book this call now, today? What was, why?
That is a great question. That's a brilliant question to ask right up front. I think that's a great segue into talking about the pain points. Is just beautiful, brilliant question. Is just say, I'm curious, what inspired you to book this call with me today? Great segue into their pain points. Well, I'm struggling with this. My doctor is worried about that. And, whatever their story is. That's a great way to open the call.
So we've kind of gone over a number of, do you feel like we covered kind of the various steps in the discovery call process? We kind of got to the offer part.
Okay, so I would say there's 2 more.
Okay.
And I'll go over these really quick. So after you present your offer, you do need to be pretty good, shall we say, at answering questions and overcoming objections. Does everybody know what an objection is?
Well,
kind of sales lingo, right? It's just, it's like things that come up that, I can't afford it, or, I don't have time, or it sounds great, but I'm worried that I won't be successful. Those are all objections. And the thing that I want to really drive home here is it's so tempting for us because it's not really very comfortable. This part gets uncomfortable for everybody, right? You're just like, okay, sounds good, bye. Okay.
Yeah. I don't want to sell anything to you.
Yeah. Like I don't want to be perceived as pushy or, salesy.
Yeah.
Totally get that. But here's the thing. Almost always the person is responding because they're fearful, right? And so just remember, like, instead of being really quick to hang up the phone and be like, okay, bye, can't afford it. Okay, I get it. See ya. Or, quickly offering them, something else. Just remember that people are scared, right? Like, they are stuck. They've probably tried a bunch of things before. Nothing's worked. And so then you start talking about the investment, and it just kind of gets a little garbled in their minds, and they're responding because they're scared. That's the biggest thing. So my biggest recommendation is to, you really want to have a strategy in place to help talk them through it. You can say things like, gosh, you always ask, right? You don't want to be real like pushy here. Can I ask you a question about that? Just approach it from curiosity. Oh, wow. Okay. Let me, do you mind if I ask you a quick question about that? I'm just really curious, because we were talking about X, Y, and Z, and you had said how, my gosh, your job's at risk because you're like, home, sick or whatever before work all the time. Your social life is, terrible. You've got all these issues, and just, basically the problem is really impacting your life on such a global scale. And you seem really clear and excited about what you want instead. So I'm just curious, what shifted for you, right? What's changed, right? So you're just don't let them completely off the hook. You're not being pushy, but you're just being really curious. Like, wait a second, like there's a incongruence here. And I feel like it's my job as, your coach or mentor or, whatever title you call yourself, to really, to ask you. And now here's the thing. If you're not worried about the outcome of the call, this is really way easier to do. If you're super worried, like, oh my God, I got to get this client. Are they liking me? How's this going? You're going to kind of tiptoe around this. But if you're like an advocate, my job is to help people. I am here to serve, right? If you have that attitude, it is so much easier. And I promise you, you are doing people a huge favor. Like, this is such a gift, because we know people tell themselves like the story of, why they can't do things all the time. That's why they're in this situation in the first place, quite often, not always, right?
Right.
So anyway, could go on and on about that. It's just so critical.
That's a really good point. It's like the person who has to get up and give a speech and they're like, oh, I'm super nervous. And you're like, yeah, go ahead. Don't do it.
Yeah. No. You advocate for them, right?
Yeah, there you go.
You can do this. Like,
exactly.
You got this. Don't let your fear hold you. You can even ask, are you going to let your fear get in the way again?
Right. I love that question.
Something like that.
So being cognizant of time, and we talked, I think we've covered some of these things as we've talked about the discovery call process, but where, people, there's so many places people can get stuck. But if you wanted to, elaborate a little bit more on any specific, you've kind of covered the whole process, maybe saying these are the, the big ticket ones. I mean, it's all important, but where do people mostly get stuck, and how can they start to move forward?
Well, I think the biggest area is they just don't have a structure in the first place, right?
Yes. And that's that whole practice element, right? So how do you get your structure and then practice so that you can actually execute it?
Yeah. So, that's really important. So I think I started to say, even coming from a background in sales, like this is a really different kind of experience, right? You're dealing with human beings that are struggling and suffering, and, it's just... So I think, having a structure and being really clear on that structure, of course, you have to be flexible during the calls, but at the same time, you do want to rein things in when things, start to go off track. So I would just say, get a structure and be really clear on your strategy for these calls and just practice. I would say, don't be super picky about who you have these calls with, at least at first. I mean, unless your calendar is just booked to the gill, I would just say your job is to become really comfortable in these conversations with people so that it just feels authentic and like you're really giving, right? So practice. That's have a structure, understand it, practice, and I think that'll be, most helpful to almost everyone.
Yeah, I like that. That advice of just practicing. I was, my son is 10 and he plays basketball, which is funny. I go to basketball practice and I sit there, right? And I watch him shoot layups. I watch his coach teach, how to shoot a layup, pass the ball. And I go out to shoot around with him. I don't get any better by sitting there watching him shoot layups and listening to his coach. You can't, that element of practice. He's getting better every day. And I think we kind of forget about the importance of, you're going to have to miss a few times, right? It's not going to be necessarily be good. But I really like your idea of the point about structure and going in with a strategy, taking leadership first. that really telling people, this is what we're doing in this call, and then keeping that structure on, asking those open-ended questions, it makes sense. And I feel that, maybe I don't think that I'm going to be perfect at it, but I feel that I could implement this and get better with practice. So that's great. So thank you for kind of elucidating all of those steps in the process. So one question I always have is about discovery calls only being for, cash pay. Like some of us, people who take insurance, why, do you offer discovery calls? What's the purpose? That type of question.
Okay. So is your question,
are they only for kind of cash pay?
Oh, okay. No, they're not. And that is such a great question. So I actually work with several dietitians that are 100% insurance-based. And one of the complaints that I hear from them and others, right, it's pretty common. I think it's maybe especially in the insurance model is, sometimes that model can, and I don't want to say always, like there's lots of exceptions here, but sometimes because, there's not always a lot of skin in the game in terms of, financial obligation, right? So sometimes that model can attract clients that are perceived as maybe not as committed, right? And they sometimes can drop off, even though they get the sessions covered. So I do have several RD clients that I work with in that situation. So what we've done is we have actually implemented this strategy, this discovery call concept into, actually quite often it's into their first paid session with an insurance client, right? And so, and the reason why I think that's so important, I mean, it's a no-brainer why you have to do this with a cash client. And certainly if you're asking someone to make a commitment, not only a financial commitment for programs and packages, but an elongated kind of experience, like a 3-month kind of commitment, there's no way around it. They're going to want to talk to you, right? Now, so that same kind of philosophy can be kind of superimposed in the insurance model, but I guess similar reasons. Mainly, you want to help that client in that first session, and it can be paid, right? Remember, it doesn't have to be like a freebie in that model, but it's still important to talk with them, help them get clear on their pain. Why do they want to change? Why is it important? What do they want to achieve? Like, you got to know that, right? And then the key to this is saying, okay, now I get where you are now. I get where you want to be. And here's what I recommend. This is like kind of the big picture, what I recommend. Now, obviously you can't get them, you can't bill them for a big package up front. But what you can do is you can just say, look, this is what it's going to take.
Yeah. This is what insurance is going to cover, and this is what you're going to need to be successful, right?
And remember, guys, it's about what are the results they want. So you think about that and you go, okay, here's what I recommend. For example, based on everything I've heard and where you want to go, I would recommend that we commit, you and I together, for a minimum of a 3-month experience, right? I want to see you in my office every other week. Let's get you scheduled, but we're going to commit to an initial 3-month experience. Are you good for that? Are you down?
Yeah.
And
I know there's a lot of movement towards additional services, whether it's meal plans or even, talking about additional access to you in between, like some of those types, I don't want to say sales conversations, could also happen there as you paint the picture of, well, your insurance is going to cover X, here. So that's kind of an interesting, here's what I found that, clients were successful benefit in this way by having access to whatever it is.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So even if, so I think probably people on this call are in different places.
Yeah, we have a question that I'll get to here.
Okay.
Amanda.
Yeah. So if you don't have that in place, like if you're not clear about what other services are that you could add on, that's fine. Still have this conversation though with people so that they don't just disappear on you. That's really the thing. Yeah. That's what we're trying to prevent.
absolutely. I think, being that 3 months, I had a new insurance client that I booked that we booked 3 months worth of weekly appointments at the session because that's what it takes. It's going to take this much time to develop this skill and that. And I think sometimes people like to know, they don't like to feel like they're going to be left hanging, that they're going to be supported, and here's how it's going to work. But so Amanda's question was, you mentioned, and that's the last question, and I'll give you Leslie's email so that you can reach out to her and connect so that you can continue learning from Leslie. So Amanda wants to know, you mentioned you need to provide a sense of urgency, exclusivity, and scarcity to get people to book a discovery call. How do you do that? So let's schedule another one of these. Maybe a couple little tips that you might have there.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, well, first of all, don't put it all over your website. Free session. Okay. Get rid of it. Just get rid of it. Okay. Because it just means that you're, sitting there waiting for them to call whenever they feel like it. So I would say get rid of it and replace. You do have to have a call to action on your website. I would make it instead, curious about how I can help. Let's chat. Right. So it's just like a little less like, hey, want a free session kind of a positioning. And then, okay, so how do you position this as something really special and kind of build in a sense of urgency? Well, okay, so I'll just give you a couple really quick examples. If you have an email list, or even if you don't for that matter, what you can do occasionally is say, hey, it's spring and I decided to open up my calendar for 10 of these, fabulous over 50 breakthrough sessions, right? Give it a name. And I'm taking applications. So to, kind of throw your name in the hat, fill out this form. I'm going to pick 10 people. And it's really not based on who fills it out first. So that is important to know. It's really based on who is most committed to change, in all honesty, because then you want to go in and you just pick 10 people. So you're setting it up. So it is like, you're picking 10. You have specified the time frame, right? So, you got to take advantage of this within the next 2 weeks. So you're incorporating that scarcity and making it special. You're giving it a special name.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's brilliant. That's an excellent tip about how to, the scarcity and the idea of exclusivity, that I have to get picked.
Yes.
And then when I have to, it's I want to. Then it's I got picked, right? So it's always, when you don't get picked. I have a 10-year-old I mentioned not getting picked is, you want to get picked, right? So we have running close on time. So I want to make sure that you have a chance to tell people how they can get in touch with you and the types of resources that you offer, so people aren't left, saying, well, I'm ready to learn more and develop my skills. How can people connect with you?
Yeah. So, well, first you can go to my website, www.leslibitel.com. Okay. So, you can check me out there. The other thing that I do want to mention, it is rather coincidental actually, that I have I've got a course, a 6-week class that is actually starting next week. I know it is rather coincidental. It is my favorite class in the whole world to teach. It's called Turning Conversations into Clients. So you can check it out at turningconversationsinto-clients.com. It is a fantastic class. And literally, I walk you through every single step, every nuance. I give you scripts, like word for word scripts that you can use in practice. It's an awesome class, and people get really great results from it. So, if you want to take a deep dive, I would recommend that. You earn 15 CEUs by participating. Cool. So that's next week. And I also do have I actually have a couple of webinars that I'm doing. Let's see, one is on Thursday and then one on Saturday. So if you guys want to check out, a webinar on this topic, you could do that as well. I don't know if I can share. Can I share the URL in the chat?
Yeah, definitely drop the URL in there, and I'll include it in the email that'll go out to everyone.
Okay. So I would say those, if you're interested in this topic in particular, and of course I'm really biased to this topic, right? Because again, everything comes down to, can you have a powerful enrollment conversation, right? Because, well, what I see quite often is in our space, we're super concerned about the website, right? And I'm all for a nice website, right?
Mm-hmm.
The reality is, go get your website, but don't spend too much time there. I guess that's my advice. And I speak from experience. Like, I did that, right? Back when I had my practice. What I would say is get good at enrollment, and and look for opportunities to invite people to step into conversations with you and enroll them.
I like that idea.
That's where we need to be focused.
You're probably missing a ton of opportunities, and pushing yourself to, you kind of have this little casual conversation with someone that's saying, right here, right now, Meagan, you're gonna step up for yourself, for your business, and say, hey, let's get on the phone and talk about that. And I think that's really important, that we're like, no, it has to be on social media, or they have to click on my blog, sign up, that it doesn't have to be that way. And I really appreciate that you brought that forward.
I mean, if you think about, those are long, what we call a sales cycle.
Yeah.
Right? The time it takes for, typically, again, there's always exceptions, but like if you find somebody on Instagram, or let me rephrase that, if they find you as the practitioner on Instagram, those people aren't going to warm up and become your clients overnight. Right? It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So I view be doing it. Yeah. But limit, you got to put a lid on that. And guys, don't hide behind your computer, right? Get out there, get out into the world, and literally invite people into conversations. You can do it online. I would say this, have some online strategies, but also have some community strategies to get your business going. I think, let's not put all of our eggs in the social media basket, right? Because it is a longer cycle just to get someone to warm up. Those are what we call cold leads.
Mm-hmm. Which I think it's interesting when you think of people who are working on a virtual practice, and I'm sure we have many people on today that maybe are doing more virtual than in person, that somehow because we counsel virtually that the clients have to come virtually. It seems like such a strange, but somehow that is a kind of a myth that I think it seems more pervasive than it should. It seems silly, but
no, I remember that, because I had a virtual practice, but someone could be your next door neighbor. Literally, they can be your next door neighbor, and you can work with them virtually.
Yeah.
Right? So, yeah.
So this has been really helpful for me. So making sure people know LesliBitel.com will drop. It's actually in the comments from the video. So right above what you're watching, you can go ahead and click on that. So if you want to get more information on her class that's coming up next week, you mentioned turning conversations into clients.com, or register for her upcoming webinars. Go to her website. If you can't find what you need, her email address is in there too, Lesli@LesliBitel.com, and I'm sure she will take great care of you getting you where you need to be.
Absolutely. Okay, so I want to make sure that I typed it in. Yep, okay. I just typed in 2 URLs. One is for the Encore webinars.
Okay.
And those will be over Saturday, right? So one is tomorrow and one is Saturday. And I go into a lot of detail on some of these concepts that we went through today. And then, of course, the creme de la creme of all classes is turning conversations into clients.com.
Mm-hmm. And I think that would be definitely valuable for someone who's ready. And because I'm always in the digital, mindset of people who want to sell digital products, major shout out to you and how you do a webinar, whether or not this is a topic that you want. If you think someday you want to run a webinar, you should definitely sign up, because Lesli structures and executes a mean webinar. She does an awesome job. So definitely check out her webinar. Just learn from a pro who's had many, many successful webinars under her belt. So just kudos to you. Every time I see your webinar launch, I'm like, oh my gosh, Leslie's killing it again. So thank you for really showing, like putting it out there, like this is how awesome you can make a webinar for your business. But that's for another conversation. So
I love that topic too. Yeah, I love all of this, and you guys can do this. I just want to leave on that note. I'm delighted to see you, Meagan. You know, I love your work and everything that you're aspiring to. It just really is. It's an exciting time, I think, for us as RDs.
It is. People are looking online. And I was speaking at the New Hampshire Academy, and I think people go online every day and try to answer their nutrition problems. And unfortunately, we're not there. We don't do as well at marketing, at selling our services as people, and we have to get better. We have to have those conversations. We have to develop the marketing skill set. And I think people who are trying or making it possible. You don't have to be perfect, but you can get better.
It's really important, and it's it's like it's wide open.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think you can get caught up and you have to do everything right, like the SEO and the backlinks and the hobbity. Literally, I'm a person who I wrote like 9 blog posts and I used free tools, and honestly, it didn't do very well. I quadrupled my email list. My traffic went up by 7x, and I did like this much. And when you listen to people who are experts, they tell you it's like this much. I did this much, okay? And not results that were, there's so many people doing it that it's not being done well. You don't have to do this much. You can do this much. This much right here. And it's probably, if someone who gave you that list would be like, oh, that's terrible. You know what? It's darn good, and you should celebrate doing like this much, because that's awesome.
Yeah, I love it. It doesn't have to be perfect. No. You don't have to be like a complete, utter digital marketing expert.
No.
Right? Just get your work out into the world.
Yeah, and stop the getting overwhelmed with, I can't start because I can't do this much. Okay, enough already. Yeah, so thank you so much, Leslie. Thank you everyone for tuning in. The next show we'll be back in 2 weeks, and we're going to be tackling the topic of working with student athletes, primarily college athletes. So that'll be a lot of fun. So we'll see you all back in a couple of weeks if that topic's in your wheelhouse. All right, thanks everyone. Thanks, Leslie.
Bye.